Hey folks, George here again. Today we're going to wrap up our discussion about what is the nature of reality and how do we know about it? Or, as I like to reframe it, what is the nature of the table and how do we know about it? We left last time with Hume's skepticism, such that we know nothing about a table outside of our minds. David Hume built upon the philosophy of George Berkeley, who developed this subjective idealism, such that there is no such thing as a table outside of minds. Hume went a bit further, though, and ultimately dismantled the foundation of scientific knowledge, certainly the knowledge of cause and effect, and the knowledge of inductive conclusions. David Hume would deny that my two hands caused that sound, or rather he would deny that he knows and that any of us know that the two hands caused the sound. David Hume would also deny that I know that the sun will rise tomorrow, and thus he develops his brand of skepticism, such that there is no knowledge outside a very narrow band of knowledge called relation of ideas, such that triangles have three sides. We know that triangles have three sides. Why? Because it's the relation of the ideas. Hume will also acknowledge that we know that this blazer is pink. Why? Because that's a matter of fact that we can observe with our perceptive apparatus, our eyes, right? However, he will, along with George Berkeley, deny that we know that this blazer exists outside of my mind. He will say, yes, there's a blazer, it's in my mind, and it's pink. The blazer in my mind that I perceive, the sensation, is a pink sensation, a pink blazer sensation. I know I have that. I don't know that this blazer exists outside of my mind. I don't know that the two hands caused the sound. I don't know that the sun will rise tomorrow. I don't know just about all facts of science. So Hume will suggest. Now we've got Kant, who saw that as a terrible, terrible position to be in with the nature of philosophy, because I wrapped up the Hume discussion with Hume's melancholic take on all of this. He said these are all ridiculous ideas, and I can't fathom to wrestle with them anymore. Kant is going to say, wait, I've got to save science, I've got to save philosophy. How can I do that? Because Hume has dismantled scientific knowledge, he's also dismantled philosophy. So then, how does Kant try to swoop in and rescue the day for us philosophers? First, Kant is going to suggest that Hume left out one type of knowledge. Kant agrees with Hume. Yes, there are matters of fact. The blazer is pink. Instead of calling that a matter of fact, like Hume would, Kant will call that a synthetic a posteriori piece of knowledge, that this blazer is pink. Kant also agrees with Hume, whereas Hume called this the other kinds of knowledge a relation of ideas. Kant will agree, yes, there are relations of ideas. Kant is going to call it an analytic a priori piece of knowledge, such that triangles have three sides, or bachelors are unmarried men. However, there's one kind of knowledge that Hume left out, according to Kant, and that is synthetic a priori knowledge, or synthetic knowledge that is prior to experience. We had synthetic a posteriori knowledge. The blazer is pink. That's knowledge a posteriori, or after experience. Can there be knowledge prior to experience about our experiences? If we remember last time, Kant suggested that his philosophy is similar to the Copernican revolution, where the Copernican revolution made us look at the stars and look at the universe in a reverse way, from a different perspective altogether. Instead of looking at the sky and the heavens from an Earth-centered perspective, Copernicus suggests we should look at the sky from a sun-centered perspective. We're all going around the sun. And if we do look at it from that perspective, everything else makes sense. We can make sense of these weird ways that people prior to Copernicus noticed the planets moving. Planets shouldn't move this way if the Earth is at the center of the solar system. Well, Copernicus said, why don't we put the sun at the center of the solar system and see if that makes sense? And lo and behold, that does make sense. And the movement of the planets and the stars makes so much more sense now because we've shifted our perspective. Copernicus shifted our perspective. Kant is going to try to do the same thing. Instead of trying to prove that the table outside of our mind exists, how can we prove that the table outside of our mind exists? Kant is going to start with the experiences we have. Let's talk about the experiences that we have and see what kind of synthetic a priori knowledge we might gain. And part of this, I'll spoil it for y'all right now, part of this synthetic a priori knowledge is going to be knowledge of cause-effect relationships, is going to be knowledge of space and time, and space outside of our minds. Because that's just how our experiences force us to believe. So let's take a look at that a little bit more carefully. Again, Kant is going to start with a table that we all perceive in our mind. We understand this table in our mind. That's going to be a key thing. If we recall Hume's philosophy from a while back, Hume suggested that perceptions are merely passing through the theater of our minds. Perceptions of cold, of thirst, of other external objects. They just pass through this theater. Kant reminds us, however, wrong. Our mind is not merely perceiving events like a camera would, like a theater would. Rather, our mind has experiences that are understood, that are organized, that make sense. How can we fathom all of that? How does any of that make sense? Well, Kant is going to say our minds are built in such a manner, such that we have to believe certain things. Our minds are just built to believe in cause-effect relationships. Our minds are just built to believe in inductive conclusions. Our minds are just built to believe that the sun will rise tomorrow. There are categories in our mind such that our sensory experience makes sense. And it is the way that our mind is structured, the way that our mind is built, that leads and contributes to these sensory experiences that we have. And by the way, one of those categories of the mind, I've already expressed, one of those categories of the mind is that we make sense of the world in terms of cause-effect relationships. One of those categories is such that our mind understands and we have experiences so that we believe in inductive conclusions, such that if I saw the sun rise every day for the past 40-some years, I know, or I conclude, that the sun will rise tomorrow. I'm just forced to believe that. Furthermore, my mind is built in such a way with a certain category that I believe in space, external to the mind. I can't make sense of the world otherwise. And neither can you, and neither can anybody else. Our minds create the world outside of our minds. Our minds are just built that way. So Kant suggests. He says that our minds thus create the phenomenal reality. What is phenomenal reality? Phenomenal reality is the world or the reality that we all experience. We have to believe in this phenomenal reality. Humans just believe in these things, that there is a reality outside of the mind, that our mind creates the phenomenal reality. Now, what does that mean? If we recall Bertrand Russell's question some time ago, Bertrand Russell posed the question, how can we prove the existence of the table outside of our mind? Well, Kant's answer to that is, you have to believe in a table outside of your mind. That's how our mind is structured. We just have to believe in it. And that's why Kant's philosophy is called transcendental idealism. It's a transcendental argument such that it goes backwards. It starts with our experience and then says, based on our experiences, what must we all believe? And that is that third type of knowledge that he introduces that Hume didn't mention. That is synthetic a priori knowledge. What is knowledge that we all must believe, that we're all forced to believe in order for our experiences to make sense? And one of those things is we are forced to believe in this table outside of the mind. Now, does that exactly answer Bertrand Russell's question? It kind of goes around it in a certain way, doesn't it? But like I've said for a long time now, I love philosophers who point out to us, wait, I think you're asking the wrong question. I can't prove the existence of the table outside of the mind. Here's what I can prove, Kant suggests. We can prove the phenomenal reality. And that is the reality of experience. There is a phenomenal reality that our minds all create. However, Kant knows that he's not entirely answering the question, and so he posits this other category of reality called noumenal reality. Noumenal reality. What is noumenal reality for Kant? Well, it's that other reality about which our minds can't experience. So let's talk about the table. There is a phenomenal table that all of our minds experience. What is the noumenal table, though? Das Ding an sich, the German that Kant wrote. The thing in itself. Das Ding an sich. What is the thing in itself? Kant admits, I don't know. I don't know. We can't say very much about noumenal reality. All we can say is that there is phenomenal reality about which we do talk very easily about. There's a table out there, out in space and time, that if I hit it, it'll cause a noise. That when I walk back into the room, after walking in and out of the room a million times, I can conclude, I do know that the table will still be there. Because that's how inductive knowledge works. Our minds are just built to make inductive conclusions. However, that noumenal reality, the thing in itself, we can't say very much about. Kant does try to say a few things about it, right? This is how Kant talks about God, for example, and other things. However, there's so much less that we could talk about regarding noumenal reality. We say very little about the nature of this noumenal reality. Isn't this a little bit intuitive when we suggest that, wait, haven't you experienced something right next to somebody? You both have the same experiences, yet you both understand it differently. Because both of our minds, my mind and my friend's mind, is creating something slightly different. Doesn't that happen? And doesn't that help Kant make a little bit more sense? Well, maybe. But Kant is saying that, listen, we're all humans. We all create a very similar type of reality, don't we? Because all of our minds are more or less similar. All of us believe in cause-effect relationships. All of us believe in inductive conclusions, that the sun will rise tomorrow. All of us, don't we, believe in space. All of us believe in time and various other categories that Kant says our mind is just built with. I like this because a 20th century philosopher who's still alive today, Thomas Nagel, wrote a famous paper about what is it like to be a bat. And Thomas Nagel reminds us, we don't know what it's like to be a bat. We can't know what it's like to be a bat. Why? Because a bat's mind is built with categories that are radically different from a human mind, aren't they? And now, I don't know much about bat biology, but what little bit I do know is that bats seem to experience the world with some kind of sonar. What is it like to experience the world with this kind of sonar, where sound goes off and then bounces back, so that they experience the world in that way? Thomas Nagel reminds us, I can't even fathom what that is like, and neither can you. Because our minds just aren't built that way. By the way, a bat won't run into the table, will it? I won't run into the table. I don't try to go through a table. A bat perceives a table. I perceive a table. What is the table, according to my experience? Well, the table is an experience given by my sensory apparatus. Vision, sound, feeling. What does a bat experience regarding the table? Well, some kind of sonar, apparently, so that when a bat is flying, it doesn't run into tables. But again, Kant's insight of this noumenal reality. What is the table in itself? A bat can't explain what the table in itself is, nor can humans. We can only explain and understand phenomenal reality. And isn't that knowledge? Isn't that knowledge, David Hume? We could learn all sorts of things about science. What do we learn? Well, if we take Kant carefully, we have to say we can understand the world the way humans understand the world. Again, reminding us of Thomas Nagel. We can't understand the world in the way that bats understand the world. But we do understand the world the way humans understand the world. And isn't that knowledge? I love how Kant has used this transcendental argument to change the question. Instead of saying, let's talk about this table outside of our minds, Kant is saying, let's talk about a table that we all experience phenomenally. And that's a table that I think many of us can agree upon regarding the weight of the table, the shape of the table, and other things. The experience of the table. We can agree on the experience of the table to a great degree, because humans are built the same way, aren't we? Now, Kant has taken us in a radically different direction than Descartes initiated. But there's other philosophers that are going to come after Kant who will take us in radically different directions still. I've already mentioned some of them previously. Let's say the pragmatists, who don't want to answer this question at all. How do we know about the table outside of the mind? They say, I don't want to be bothered with that kind of question. But the pragmatists were, as I illustrated last time, influenced by this Lockean sort of idea, such that let's not ask that question. That's an impossible question that I'm not concerned with. I want to talk about other questions. There's other postmodernist philosophers who take skepticism to a great degree. But again, we see that they're influenced by this Humean type of skepticism, amongst others, such that we can deny certain things. So I like that we'll stop at Kant right now, just for a moment at least, because so many of the philosophers after have been influenced by this modern tradition between Descartes and Kant. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.